same okay, the same screen that I am with people coming in. So we will continue to admit people as they come in. Good morning and welcome to the RIAC Learning Series. My name is Vanessa Brewer. I am the Regional Interagency Council, also known as RIAC, Program Administrator at the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. Our presentation today is Trauma-Informed Care, and our speaker is Melanie Watts. Melanie is a member of the Barren River RIAC and a Trauma-Informed Care trainer. And I'm going to turn it over to her in just a second so she can tell you a little bit more about herself. But before I do that, I wanted to share just a few netiquette housekeeping items before we get started. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and mute your mics. This workshop will be recorded and it's going to be archived on the RIAC webpage as a resource to use and to share with others on your councils or at your agencies that couldn't make it today. And that will be archived as soon as we figure out how to do that on the RIAC webpage. So it's coming, don't give up. You can use the chat box for questions or comments if you have them. Lee and I are both going to be monitoring that for Melanie today. And we've also got some time carved out at the end for questions and answers and just conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you. And hopefully you can see my screen, maybe.
Yeah.
Can everyone see that? Yes, good.
Yes.
See, I'm already ahead. I'm already ahead of the game. Because Zoom is not my forte. It should be after a year. Just a little bit about me. I am not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. I am the Director of Community Engagement for Life Skills. Prior to Life Skills, I did 24 years at the Bowling Green Police Department and retired as Deputy Chief in charge of patrol investigations and dispatch. I am the adopted mother of 4 little girls under 10. And I have a different perspective about trauma, and hopefully I can share a little bit with you about that. And this is a participatory thing. So at certain times I will ask questions. Feel free to jump in, unmute yourself and share, if you will. And this is just going to give you an overview of trauma-informed care. I took this training as a police officer, actually, when I was deputy chief. And because I wanted my officers to not re-traumatize people that we were dealing with on a daily basis. And I think that that's always super important. So hopefully you'll get something out of this today. Hopefully I will too. I always learn something when I do these. And we'll go forth. And if you have any questions, you don't have to raise your hand and all that. I am looking at a screen. Vanessa and Lee will maybe help me out if you do that, but feel free just to jump in and ask the question, if you will. This is just a disclaimer. If there's something that is said that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to check out. We're here to talk about trauma and trauma-informed care. Sometimes that is a trigger for people, and I will share a few things about me. Know that we're always here for you. You're not alone. If something triggers you, and feel free to like I said, take a break, check out, because trauma is not an equal opportunity employer, if you will. What is trauma? And I'm not going to read these slides to you. You're all grown adults. This is about talking about trauma and how it affects people differently, and how we can talk about a system of care that addresses trauma and what it does. So obviously, an event or series of events, experience, this can be different for all individuals, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually as well. In this training, part of it is talking about how it affects me. And I'm going to share, hopefully, and I was joking at the beginning of this, hopefully this will give you maybe a different perspective, because all of us who are here today have experienced some form of trauma. And it might not be something that has been everlasting in your lifetime. It might have been a one-time event. It might have been, a death of a loved one at a young age. You might have experienced domestic violence in your childhood, neglect, workplace harassment is one. Hopefully none of you have experienced trafficking, but you may know someone who has. School violence is big right now, unfortunately. Natural or man-made disasters, these are things you may not automatically think of as a trauma, but they certainly are. Separation from a loved one, survivor of bullying. And the last one on there, police brutality, which obviously is very prevalent right now. So for me, one of the reasons that I started in policing, I was a nursing major and decided that I probably would not be a good nurse because I would be that person pushing the morphine on the people who asked me to, who were terminally ill, because I couldn't see people in pain and suffering. So I thought, well, I probably don't need to go down that road in my lifetime, and decided to go into broadcasting. So I majored in broadcasting and psychology in college, and then decided that broadcasting was a cutthroat thing to do. During this time in my life, I began my first job when I was 16 and had a boss who would schedule me at certain times, closing this entity that I worked at. And I was, I had to deal with a lot of sexual harassment from my boss at 16 years old. At 17, I moved out on my own and was going to college and still working there because I did not think that I could leave and support myself and go to school and do everything. This harassment continued for 5 years of my life. And that was probably one of the reasons that I went into policing, because I wanted to help others that couldn't help themselves. And so I felt like I was trapped where I was at 16 years old. And when I finally told someone what was going on and what I was having to go through, there was disbelief, which was even worse. And then I was asked why I stayed there as long as I did. And that's a whole nother ball of wax, as we call that. So I'm going to touch on my experience as we go through this. And if you have any comments, or feel free to jump in on that. So obviously trauma occurs in layers. And when you're talking about trauma in childhood, you're talking about forming that personality, forming the fundamental layers of that childhood. And so everything else goes on top. And obviously when you peel, and that Shrek and that onion, just saying, in case you're like, why is Shrek's face in that onion? Yes, because Shrek underlying was a prince. But for those of you that know it or don't have kids, you need to watch Shrek. Okay. So anyway, trauma. It has layers and it just continues. This, I think, is very interesting. And I left this in because we don't often think of the big picture of what trauma does and what it costs. It not just costs the person who is going through it psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, but this is what it costs the community. When you're talking about childhood health care, adult medical care as you grow older, quality of life costs, child welfare, criminal justice system, and special education. I said earlier, I'm the adoptive parent of 4 little girls, 2 of which have been diagnosed with mental illness. And so it is a constant roller coaster ride with them. It's a constant adjustment. Therapists, medication, special programs, peer supports, I can only imagine the money already that we've endured on two. So hopefully, we've caught it early enough to where they can understand why they are who they are and their special powers that they have, and use them for good instead of evil. And hopefully, as adults, not incur the community to have these costs. But I thought that was very interesting. So let's talk about the impacts of trauma. And then, what trauma actually impacts the age of the child, the developmental stage, perception of danger, the past experience with trauma, and the availability of others who can help them through that and offer help and make them feel safe. Here's the deal. When you have a traumatic event, you kind of reorganize yourself around that event. So for me, having someone sexually harass me for 5 years, that was at my core. Now, granted, I was 16, so you can only imagine that occurring to a child at 5 or 6, when the brain is still, early development of the brain is within the first 5 years. And you can only imagine how that forms the personality, the trust issues. It's tough. For me at 16, it changed my trusting of others. It changed how I looked at myself, how I felt about myself. And I went from a straight A student, knowing what I wanted to do in life, to changing majors 2 times, to putting myself in situations, dangerous situations that I shouldn't have at that time. So it changes, trauma changes the whole person, not just little pieces. And so when we don't recognize trauma and what it can do to the person, when we're trying to help, we can inadvertently re-traumatize, we can trigger. And I've often found that people who responded to me when I tried to let people know what was going on with me, they didn't know. They didn't know how to deal with me. They didn't know what questions to ask. Instead of saying, what happened to you? They said, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you stay in that job as long as you did? And so you talk about re-traumatizing throughout. I love this. First off, because we all think of this when we get in the ocean, I'm sure. But trauma changes your worldview. And you can see Calvin and Hobbes here. He's testing the water for sharks, knowing that the sharks are not in the tub, but yet this is in his mind. This is how his mind is formed. I love that. We have to keep in mind that trauma affects the whole view of the person. And I talked about early development. This is just an example of the healthy brain on the left. And you see how all that brain tissue is connected. This is a PET scan. And then the brain of an abused child on the right. And you can see how that brain is disconnected and how the pathways are basically eaten alive. And you can see down at the bottom, the colors, least active. So the brain is actually shutting down on this 5-year-old and not allowing growth. So when I said I'm talking about a personal story, my story didn't just stop after I left my job where I was working, because I got hired at the Bowling Green Police Department when I was 24. And at that point, I was told that I was 2% over body weight, 2%. Over body weight. They actually put me in a dunk tank to check my body fat percentage to get hired at a police department. And they told me that I had 2 weeks to lose 5% because I needed to be under 5% body fat in 2 weeks. So what I started to do was to throw up everything that I ate. And I ran 6 miles a day and survived on 2 bagels and a regular Coke. That's what I had every day. And if I ate anything else, or I had to eat something else in front of someone else, then I would go throw it up immediately. The reason that I did that was in control. I was in control. And I often think that the reason I went into policing was I had control. I had control, or so I thought, of the situation, of things that were going on around me, of the calls of service that I went on. Ultimately, I was the one that had the control in those situations. My eating disorder continued until I was about 30 years old, until I was actually damaging my heart. And my physician said, you have to stop, you're killing yourself. My hair was falling out. I was having issues with my teeth. I was having severe damage done to my heart because I was still 95 pounds at 5'4", and I thought I looked fabulous, and still running 6 miles a day. But others around me just kind of ignored what I looked like, and didn't want to assist or talk about it. It wasn't until I went through EAP with the police department to actually talk about the issues that were causing me to do that, and dealing with the sexual harassment that occurred earlier in my life. So when we talk about ACEs, this is something that is I find fascinating. It's adverse childhood experiences. And this is basically a scale, and the domains of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, caregivers struggling with substance use disorder, separation, divorce of parents, interpersonal violence in the home. A lot of these things people experience in their childhood. When you have ACEs, when you have a certain number of these factors in your childhood, what is found is that, and I'm going to give you some stats, and it kind of floored me when I first heard it. Can anyone think of something else that is not listed on this screen that might affect your childhood? Anything else? And if I failed to say it earlier, this is like participatory. Anything?
You broke up for me, so I couldn't hear everything that you said. Could you repeat the question?
Can you think of anything else that is not on this screen that would qualify as a traumatic event as a child? That's a lot on the screen, but I'm talking about specific things. And I can think of one that's not on there.
I would think, and I was looking to see if it's on there, but I would think death of a parent or a loved one.
Yes.
Melanie,
exactly.
I don't know if you can see the chat box, but we've got some people that are writing in there. One person put abandonment. Somebody did put death of a loved one, and then death of a parent.
Yes. Thank you. And you guys, you don't, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have glasses on right now. So, I mean, might want to participate with glasses, but it's going to give you the view. If you guys just want to speak, you don't have to put it in the chat box. I love how Zoom has trained us to put everything in chat box. I don't know if you guys remember AOL when it first started, but Messenger was like the hottest thing since sliced bread. And we've gone back to that. We've gone back to it. So, but yes, thank you for that. But death of a loved one. It's tough for kids. I mean, when you're talking about a child going through any of these things, you think, oh, well, we all want to, if you have children, we all think, I don't want to damage or hurt my kids. in any way, shape, or form. But a certain level of stress, a certain level of resiliency is kind of needed in life. Because if you don't have that, then you don't know how to cope with things. You don't know how to bounce back, if you will, from some of these things. And it's very hard. One of my kids is on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and she has no coping skills whatsoever. Everything is 0 to 100. It may be the toothpaste cap didn't go on correctly. It may be that her underwear is bothering her today. Just a few examples of this morning. But what I hope to give her down the road is to take a breath and to go, okay, but how are you right now? You're okay right now. And we go on and we process it. And a lot of these things, you know, when you're talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse, that's not like in the moment. That is a lifelong processing of what has occurred and what goes on. But we always want to give them the opportunity, if you will, to learn how to cope. If you see this, and I hope you all can see the screen, a lot of these things are on the top. And if you look down where the roots are of this: poverty, discrimination, community disruption, poor housing, violence, what we found is that if you have ACEs, if your number is high on the screener for the adverse childhood experiences, and you couple this with the roots that you already have. And so if you are, you know, experiencing discrimination, if you have poor housing, and then on top of that, let's say mom or dad is diagnosed with mental illness, or they have alcoholism, or there is physical or emotional neglect in the home, the likelihood of you not developing certain things as an adult goes high. So it is, it's really important. And I'm saying this adverse community environments, because we're now realizing that obviously everything begins with the roots. Everything begins with the foundation if you don't have a good foundation. And I will point out that if you have the foundation, if you have, you know, a supportive environment, if you have the supportive school environment, if you have the supported home environment, and the child goes through, let's say, emotional abuse or bullying at school, or even homelessness, it's found that that foundation can actually help them overcome and learn to cope. And the outcome is not as bad, if I'm making sense with that. I found this incredibly, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, that's depressing. This is from the CDC. ACEs in an adult disease. So the higher the ACE score on these factors, the more likelihood. So if you have 4 or more of ACEs, which is any of those things that were on the screen earlier, including what we talked about, death, you know, separation, all of those. If you look at 78% of people who use IV drugs had 4 or more ACEs as a child. 4 or more ACEs as a child. I mean, that's huge. So what we're looking at for people who are addicts and drug users, you know, it goes back to the childhood. And I think we knew that down deep, but we're talking about trauma, and we're talking about taking care of that trauma and addressing the trauma and learning how to live with the trauma. And a lot of the time we don't do that. You know, we say, why are you using drugs? I don't know, maybe it's self-medication, maybe it's this or that. But it all comes back to childhood trauma. If you look at the people who have attempted suicide, 58% of people who attempt suicide have had childhood trauma. And again, the trauma, what you may consider trauma, may not be trauma to them. It may be everyday life. And some of the most horrific things that I saw as a police officer, I was absolutely and utterly amazed that these children still had the will to get up and go to school and do the work and then come back home to the environment that they were coming home to. And some of them actually came out of that really well. But it was absolutely horrific what they had to deal with. So I said that earlier, is that the war on drugs is basically a war on traumatized people that we have to help. And that's something that we're not being addressed. So if you look at that, there's a link stronger between childhood trauma and substance use than there is between obesity and diabetes. That's huge. It's huge. And so it's about changing the perception of what trauma is and how we deal with the trauma, and not belittling that trauma that the person is going through. So the rest of my story, obviously I went on with the police department and had the moment of clarity, if you will, of I'm killing myself. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to live. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. And I had to learn the balance of allowing myself forgiveness for putting up with the sexual harassment. When I say sexual harassment, this man was 20 years my senior. And no child should have to go through, and I say child, I was 16 to 21. No one should ever have to go through what I went through. The psychological part of it, of him telling me that I would not be able to find a job anywhere. He would make sure that I wouldn't get another job anywhere in the town, that he loved me, that he wanted to protect me, and that my best interest was always in the forethought for him. He would schedule me for clothes with him by myself. It was all I could do to get out of the building sometimes. And fortunately for me, he never raped me. Or anything of that nature, but psychologically and physically just damaged me to the point where I thought it was all my fault. And most of the victims who go through something like that, that's what they think. It's their fault. It's their fault for allowing it to happen. It's their fault for continuing it, for them to allow for it to happen. So it was about self-love for me, about forgiveness for him. And I tell that story only because I had just retired at the Barren River Police Department. And unfortunately, I had to deal with this person in the community as a police officer. And I had to smile and act like everything was okay. And I really wanted to hurt him, but I couldn't. And as I retired, he walked into my church one Sunday. And I really had to have a conversation with Jesus at that moment and talk about forgiveness. And that was the best thing that I ever did, was forgiveness for myself and for him. And I let that be. So hopefully my children will never have to go through what I went through, and the self-harm that I did to myself, of not eating and continuing that trauma throughout my life. That's my ultimate goal, to kind of help others. If we can talk about, can everybody hear me okay? I'm getting. If we can talk about, there's 6 protective factors that can help with dealing with trauma. And so this is something that we are working on in Kentucky Strengthening Families. The parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of child development, concrete support in times of need, which was awesome, social emotional competence of the children, and nurturing and attachment. A lot of you are in your various entities that deal with RIAC and that deal with community, families, children. These are all important things. And I think that our focus has shifted. And so now we are now realizing we can't make changes, little changes, we have to make fundamental changes. And so a lot of the things that I know here in Bowling Green, I'm part of Family Enrichment, I'm on their board, we teach little learners, we teach parenting classes, we teach parents what their kids are going through. We help parents teach their own children how to be nurturing and have attachments and help those parents through. So all of these factors play a role. And, you know, the families need those supports. Parents need to know how to parent. And families need to get assistance meeting those basic needs. If you don't have your basic needs met, then you can't do anything socially or emotionally. And the children can't feel loved and safe if all of those needs are not met. So when these 6 factors are present, regardless of the number of risk factors, regardless of the number of ACEs present in the home, the likelihood of child maltreatment greatly reduces. In exchange, the rate of school readiness, children reaching optimal development, and the strength of the family unit. I mean, that's what we're focusing on, is that strength of the family union. And what we like to look at is, and I know a lot of you already know this, a lot of you are already trying to do this in your communities, in your entities that you work with. What child and family looks like right now, if you look at the services that are, you know, provided, sometimes you have to go through one thing to get to another thing. And it's confusing and it's hard. For families to do that. They don't know where to turn, they don't know what to do. And instead we're looking at, you know, that a lot of these entities are in silos, they're by themselves. But what RIAC does, and I know a lot of you do this daily, and thank you for that, is that, you know, if your phone rings and somebody needs information, you don't just say, well, you need to call so-and-so, da, 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 da. You get them the information because we're all part of a system of care. And hopefully one day it'll be a one-stop shop in terms of, hey, let's wrap ourselves around these people and get them the help and care that they need. That's what we're working for. So all of these entities that are popping up, and I'm going to say is from a parent and adoptive parent perspective, I have used every single one of these on the screen, from First Steps to United Way to public preschool. The Friskies, I say Friskies, the family, I said Friskies the other day and somebody said, what are you talking about? It's family resource youth centers, but they're called Friskies, just in case you didn't know that. But every single one of these entities I've used as a parent. And for me, it was much easier because coming from the police background, I knew where to go. I knew what services I needed for my children. Most parents don't know that. They don't know where to turn. And it gets worse when they don't have that. So it's our job as whatever position that you're in, if you're on this, it is your job to help these people find the help that they need. So it's a framework, and that's what we're working towards, is the strength-based, family-driven approach to help decrease trauma. So I said this earlier, you know, when we're dealing with people with trauma, you ask what happened instead of what's wrong with you. That's we're just replacing language on that. So trauma-informed system of care, that's what we're working for, a comprehensive spectrum of mental health and other necessary services, which are organized into a coordinated network. And I've found that we are doing this more. And I say we, I still am stuck in the police lingo language. I heavily work still with the Bowling Green Police Department in dealing with our mentally ill in the community, our homeless population, and getting them the assistance and things that they need. And we're trying to get a mental health court up and going as well to take care of that judicial aspect of it. But we need to realize that it's our job to help, to make our community better. The trauma-informed care is a perspective that reminds everyone what consumers have likely been through. And I hate the word consumers, I say client. Consumers has somewhat of a negative connotation to me because they're consuming our time, which they do. However, they're clients, they're people, and they need to be treated as such as well. And we need to take into account the trauma. And I will share my 4 girls. I had contact with the first one with the police department and her mother. Never dreamed I would end up with this child 3 months later. But her mother had been through trauma. Her mother had been sexually abused, put into the foster care system, sexually abused again, removed from the foster care system, put into a group home. My children's mother, they all have the same mom, but they have different fathers. So they're all half sisters. And this child, their mother, had been through so much trauma and it had never been addressed. And so when the various agencies were trying to work with this mom, they're telling her, well, you need to be on medication because you have a mental illness. You need to do this, you need to do that, this. Not once was her trauma ever dealt with or asked about. They told her she needed to go to parenting classes. She went to parenting classes. They never told her she needed to go to therapy to deal with the trauma, already knowing what she had been through. She has since had 2 other children besides my 4, and has gone through 5 other men in this time. She's still in that cycle. We failed her in the system. So I could understand why she was doing what she was doing. It's not that I approved, but she was formed very early on that. So our system of care, we incorporate that culture of safety, and trauma-informed care is at the basis of everything that we do or trying to do in terms of dealing with our community engagement, our community problems. And before we can do that, we have to shift that paradigm. I love the little chick coming out saying, oh, wow, paradigm shift. I was in this nice little safe egg and now here I am. That's something that's hard sometimes. When you're talking about shifting paradigms, we're talking about shifting the way we think of things. We're talking about shifting the way we deal with trauma, shifting the way we treat people who have been through trauma. One of the things that I always did as in the police department, I told my officers, you treat people the way that you want to be treated. And if you don't think that your grandmother would approve of the way that you treated someone, then you're doing it wrong. Because that was just the way it was. I thought it was very important for the officers to understand what trauma was, what mental illness is, that it is not something that is chosen, that is something that unfortunately many people go through. But to have perspective, kind of walk in their shoes, if you will. So trauma-informed care, it's one that we help individuals heal. And until we help each individual heal, our community issues, our community problems will continue until that trauma is addressed. So it is about a commitment to making changes on the practices that we do, the culture of an entire organization. When you talk about changing the culture of a police department, you can think of the news right now and what's going on. Fortunately, the Bowling Green Police Department, I was very proud of. Every officer has been trained with crisis informed CIT training, which is for crisis training of dealing with people with mental illness. They also know of the trauma-informed care. Even the chief went through training to deal and to not re-traumatize these people and to treat people with respect and dignity in all walks and shape of life. So it is about shifting that paradigm and shifting the way we deal with people. These are a few examples of what you can do and what really needs to be done organizationally. Trauma-informed care is about educating, completing the needs assessment on certain things, strategic planning of the 10 implementation domains, which can be governmental, organizational, all of these, but it still comes down to the events, the experience, and the effects that trauma has on each individual. We can't put trauma in one little bag and say, okay, we've got it in the Ziploc bag. We know what it is now. We can deal with it because again, trauma is different for everyone. What I experienced as a police officer for 24 years, to me, is not trauma. For anyone else who was in that mindset or to deal with that would probably be very traumatized on what was going on and what I was seeing on a daily basis. Again, it's different for every person on that. Trauma-informed approach, the key norms. So these are some of the things that have to occur. So the realization, the recognition, that's really not a word. Recognizing what trauma is, how we respond to trauma, resisting to re-traumatize on how we deal with people, and taking in the 6 key principles of this approach. So knowing that they're safe, giving people a reason to trust us, to be transparent with them, having peer support, collaboration, mutuality, empowerment, which is so important, the voice and the choice, which goes back to resilience on that. Cultural, historical, and gender issues, taking in all of those accounts, those are huge right now. And I think we have not done a really great job on recognizing all of those, but those have to be taken into account as well. When I said the 10 domains of how you can put this together, leadership, policy, your physical environment, how you go about this, engagement and involvement, cross-sector collaboration. The wraparound approach is one of the best things that ever happened to policing. It is one of the best things that I'm doing at Life Skills right now with our mental health issues. I cannot help one person myself. It is a wraparound, and we have to wrap our arms around these people and get them the fundamental things that they need and give them the power and the voice and the choice to change and to deal with their trauma and be in recovery and be survivors of what they've gone through. All of these are the implementation domains, and they're all important. The one thing I do want to touch on is, and I think it's very important because as caregivers, providers, healers, we are susceptible as well to trauma. And the trauma of dealing with people who have been through trauma. And some of the things, just the signs, please be aware. I'm always, it's one of the most important things to me. It was with my officers. It is with the people that I work with now at Life Skills. I see it here. I see therapists who have to be encouraged to take care of themselves. They become emotional, their physical health starts going down, isolation, workplace issues, irritability, decreased concentration, numb and detached. All of these things can occur to us. I saw officers go through it. becoming detached, not dealing with what they were seeing on a daily basis, or the trauma of death and all of that. So it can be very heavy, but yet we're the kind of gatekeepers to take care of ourselves and to take care of those that we work with. Self-care, very, very. Did I say it was very important? It is, because if you don't take care of yourself, then you can't take care of anyone else in a really great way. COVID, for me, was a terrible thing. I was home with 4 kids for like 18 months, whatever it was. But on the flip side of that, it was the most fabulous thing ever, because it gave me time to work on myself, even with 4 kids at home. And I recognized the need that I wasn't putting myself first and taking care of me. And I was not doing a really great job taking care of 4 kids when I wasn't taking care of myself. So I wanted to end on that note. I'm not going to revamp trauma and all of this. I want to open up to allow you, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about anything that's on your mind, or maybe that I went over really fast, because this was an hour and I can talk to you until lunchtime if you want to, but I don't think you want that. But does anybody have questions or anything else? And I'll be happy to send it. Well, Vanessa recorded it, so this will be on. So all of this will be on the website. If there's anything else that you need, we'll be happy to get it to you. But really, it's about coming together in all of our systems and taking care of not only our community, our families, but ourselves as well. So does anyone have any questions? And I always put this on there because it's important. If you don't have it in your phone, put it in your phone. Put the Suicide National Hotline number in your phone, because you may need it or someone else you love may need it. And it's much easier to have it in your phone than to try to look it up, or what is that number or whatever. So please put it on there. Anyone have any questions?
I've got a question.
Okay.
So, RIACs serve as the local governing body of the system of care. And one of the primary functions of RIAC is to promote system of care awareness, which includes promoting the system of care core values across the community, trauma informed being one of those. You had mentioned where law enforcement had adopted the trauma informed principle. I'm sure that wasn't easy to do in the beginning. So my question to you is, how do we get buy-in from the various system of care partners around the state to become trauma informed?
Here's the thing. I am a loudmouth. I'll be honest, I'm a loudmouth, right? I have no filter for the most part, and I'm pretty much an open book. And how I got buy-in for the police department was, anytime you can show that it helps the community stat-wise. First off, use of forces went down on the police, dealing with mentally ill, homeless, overall, the use of force went down. Because the greatest thing that we can ever do, the best tool that we ever have, is our mouth and our brain. And if they work together, that's even better, right? Like everybody's like, they're asleep right now, they're asleep, it's okay. But the buy-in for this is to show that it works, because one entity cannot heal one person. The police department, when they're responding to a domestic violence situation, it's not just a domestic violence situation. There may be kids in the home, there may be animals in the home. The children may not have gone to school. There are so many facets to that call. And instead of just arresting that person and saying, okay, you're safe now, off we go. What we did was, okay, where can the kids go? Are the kids in therapy? Are the kids in school? Resources within the school that we can utilize. Whoever the victim was in the domestic violence, do you have what you need? Do you know how to get a protective order? Do we need to do that for you? Do we need to transport you? You know, there were so many facets to that, and to show that our calls for service went down. You know, if we had frequent flyers that we call them, because they were, you know, he hit me again, he did this again. Okay, we're doing our job if we're getting that same call over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, right? You continue to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And so that buy-in came all the way up to the top, to the chief, in terms of how we deal with our community. And we are a part of the community. We're not just this entity who responds, we are a part of it. We're integrated. Now, not all police departments are like that. We can watch the national news and see that. That's unfortunate, but that change, you know, that paradigm shift starts within that organization. So I'm very vocal, especially in this region of hey, we need to work together, because if we don't work together, it's not going to change. We're not going to make a difference. We're not going to, you're still going to get the same people coming into your office needing the same things over and over. We're not teaching them how to take care of themselves. We're just doing it for them. Did that? See, I went off, Vanessa. You got me on that train, and that train just left the station and it was going.
No,
Hey, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm passionate about that as well. My husband is a police officer, and I know that he feels the exact same way. Like, and I feel like that we're both so passionate about it. I would love to know. I've just started on the RIAC in Northern Kentucky, and I would love to have some trainings at some of the different agencies if that's something that you're open to.
Susan, there is crisis intervention training in Northern Kentucky. Like we're very, very, and I still teach crisis intervention training through the Department of Criminal Justice for law enforcement. That is something that's dealing with mentally ill and the homeless population. The RIAC part of it, what we did just here regionally, we, you know, one of our sheriff, who I used to work with many years ago, said, you know, our officers are responding to these calls for service and they don't know what's available in the community. They know the generality, but, you know, if you tell somebody who's in a crisis moment, hey, therapy, there's therapy available, life skills. The likelihood of them remembering that or noting that in that moment of crisis is small. So what we did was he wanted a card. He said, is there something we can hand out? And I said, well, yeah, but I don't want life skills just to be on it. I want every agency that offers something to either adults or children to be on this card. And when I say card, it's a 4x6 card. And that was the opening of the door, if you will, for these officers. It not only educated the officers, but it was something physical people could hold in their hand and hold on to. So when they had a moment of clarity, they could call the number, and all the numbers were listed and what's on it. So it's the greatest thing. Training is awesome. Crisis intervention training. If your husband hasn't had it, tell him it's available through DOCJT. If he's in Kentucky, that is available. And it's something that all police officers should have. I have no problem going and talking about training anywhere in the state. If RIAC wants me to do that, that's fine and great, and I will be happy to do that. Most of the time, you have to get that chief's approval to come in and talk. And I don't mind doing that either, wherever I need to go, whenever I need to be. So it's a passion of mine to kind of change the mindset. Not just for people in police, but for people with mental illness and addiction problems as well.
Well, I think you have given me a really good idea to pass out some cards that we have made up with a bunch of resources on it and get those out to all the police officers that are out there.
Yes.
To pass out in crisis moments for people. So that is a great idea.
And we did it for kids. Yeah, we did it for kids as well. And we made the cards blue. for kids. So the officers can differentiate because, they're hopping, they're going from call to call to call, whatever. And so a lot of times it's like, which one, if I don't have my glasses on, you're messed up. But so the blue cards are for the kids. And so we have different packs, and I distributed them to KSP, the sheriff's unit, to our local police, even Western Kentucky University Police Department, because everyone deals with moments of crisis. Everyone does. And it's just giving the officers another tool as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. That's
No
some
problem,
really good
Susan.
ideas.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else have any other questions? I gave you so much information in so little time. I know.
I do know if we have RIACs on here that are interested in having this training provided to your RIAC members, because, one of our goals is to help support agencies in becoming trauma informed, especially those agencies that sit around the table of RIAC and our system of care partners. So I know that there are trauma informed care trainers throughout the state too. And I don't want to speak for Melanie. She did an awesome job, and I would hope she would be able to travel there. Not travel, we're all on Zoom. Who am I kidding? She'd be able to hop on a meeting and do that as well. But I know that we have a list on there. Brittany's got that list. Brittany Barber's on here too. She's got a list of people throughout the state that can come in and provide this training for anyone that's interested to be able to support us in helping agencies becoming trauma informed.
Yeah, and I will say I'm much better in person. I spit out a lot of information for everyone here, and I apologize. I felt like I was going 100 miles an hour, and there's so much more that needs to be said about trauma informed care. I will say, if you're interested in it, reach out in your communities. Crisis intervention training has regional meetings as well. And I pull in just about anyone who you talk about, social workers, teachers, friskies, any nonprofit. I bring them all together to the table, because when we're talking about cross systems helping people and not re-traumatizing them and causing more trauma and putting those stats up, it's huge. It's huge. And I have had more success in just asking people to come forth. And even, I know Priscilla's on here from insurance companies, you name it, I bring them in, because ultimately everyone has a hand in the card game here. And so we have to include everyone, even, nursing homes, everyone, anyone that wants to come, allow them to come. Any other questions or anything?
Do you mind sharing your email? So, because one of the things I would like to do is see what's in the child packet that they give out to like young people or children that they come in contact with crisis numbers or whatever. I would love to see what that looks like and what all they include in that.
Yeah, so I can send you a copy. Yeah, I can send you a copy of our card. I put my email in the chat box. I'm sure Vanessa can put that up as well on RIAC. But I will be happy to send you a copy of the card. Our crisis card is really directed toward parents dealing with children. And I'll be honest, like a couple of those I've used. So, and I was like, oh, I didn't know this was available. And I've been in this community for most of my adult life and still have no clue sometimes of what other services are available for my kids. So I'll be happy to send you a copy of that, or I can even send it to Vanessa. She can post it on RIAC. And it's a front and back card that fits literally in the officer's front pocket, so they can pull it out at any time. It's been a godsend really for a lot of the officers and a lot of parents. So, but yeah, we'll be happy to send you that.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. You got
my
wheels turning.
That was the purpose. That was the purpose. And if I can be of any service, the email is on there, even if it's something you don't want to ask me now. If there's something that you felt, I'm great on feedback. You cannot hurt my feelings. Really. I live for it. Give me the feedback. Give me something. If I miss something, if you want something different, If there's more information that needs to be shared, feel free to email me, let me know. I'm 24/7. I'm still on.
Well, you did a great job. I really appreciate the information.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone?
I just want to say hi. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Brittany, we can hear you.
Hi. I think you did such a marvelous job, Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, yes,
Oh,
you guys can always go ahead.
I still want your glasses. I'm just saying.
You can have them. I don't know if you want the vision, but
well, the next thing for me is a dog is what my doctor told me. So I'm joking, but yeah, she actually did say that because I said, what's after bifocals, like trifocals? And she's like, no, a dog. And she thought that was funny. Anywho, but I love your glasses.
yeah. Thank you so much. But I just wanted to put this out there too. Although our trauma-informed care training for trainers is full at this time for June 15th, we do hope to offer one in the fall if anyone is interested in attending that training. And again, that training is for anyone who wants to be a champion around trauma-informed care and to be able to go out and then train the community on trauma-informed care as well. So Vanessa can always send out my contact information if anyone is interested in that in the future.
Thank you, Brittany. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything? Well, Melanie, I want to thank you for spending your Friday morning with us. You did an amazing job, and I love that you shared your personal story with us because I think that helps us to see just how real it is and how widespread it is.
It is.
And
Thank
so
you.
it kind of helps us to put it into perspective. So I appreciate you doing that. Anything that Melanie shares with me, I'm happy to pass along. We've got the list of everybody that participated in the training this morning. We'll also put this, once we figure out exactly how to do it, this will be on our RIAC webpage, so you can share it with other members of your RIAC and or system of care partners that did not get to attend. Our next RIAC Learning Series opportunity is scheduled for August the 6th. It'll be again at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the topic is engaging and partnering with local political leaders with our very own Liz Moreland. She is the LRC of the Bluegrass RIACs. And we also have Sheila Schuster, who is going to be presenting with Liz as well. She's the Executive Director of Advocacy Action Network. So we'll have registration out for that in a couple of weeks. Thanks everybody for spending your Friday morning with us. We appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoys their weekend.